Today I'm joined by Loving Foods, who are one of the OGs of fermented foods and drink. Welcome to Adam, Faye, and Mendel, the founders of Loving Foods.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you for having us.
Yeah. And thank you for having us.
What kind of diets were you eating before you discovered ferments?
It was relatively okay. I was definitely aware of nutrition, but probably I'd say on like a surface level. So I'd started, cutting out processed foods, um, sugar, minimizing wheat, dairy, that kind of thing. But it was about around 2006 when I really got into nutrition on a kind of deep level, and that was I guess I was forced into it through health issues. And I went to see a nutritional therapist who helped me a lot. Um, and later became a good friend of mine as well. And I learned a lot from him. And he introduced me to a book, was basically from Sandor Katz. It's his first book, I think, what was it? Wild Fermentation. It's like the Bible, I guess. So this was quite some time ago. Like fermented food weren't readily available in the UK. And at that point, I'd started eating, organic and really cleaning up my diet, um, and introducing sauerkraut. There was like one product on the market. So yeah, I'd say at that point it was okay, but I didn't know more, you know. And as I learnt more, like one of the first aspects that I really concentrated on was the gut, healing the gut on, I guess, from different aspects, from detoxification, from just, clearing out the gut, having a reset, to then figuring out what foods work for the gut. And, that took quite some time to really fine tune it, but it was those initial steps. And then, introducing fermented foods. It was like some sauerkraut, and then I started making my own sauerkraut. And also used to, not so much kombucha at that point, but there was a particular drink I would get from Australia, which was fermented. It was very potent. Um, it's kind of like, I guess you could say, kombucha on steroids. It was like really strong, but had high amounts of, beneficial bacteria. And, amongst many other things I was doing around like healing the gut, that made a big difference. And that kind of set me off on a bit of a mission with fermentation, which is when I started experimenting, making my own. And yeah, that led into many different aspects.
Faye and I were eating just a standard, normal Western diet, lots of frozen food, and it was very unhealthy before we got introduced to healthy eating and fermented food. Also, like Mendel, for health reasons. So Faye and I both had health issues that we wanted to deal with, but we were eating a pretty average to poor diet before we were introduced to it.
Yeah. So did that come from Mendel then? He was the one that introduced you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Faye struggled with IBS. I had ulcerative colitis, so we went to Mendel to ask for advice, and it was Mendel that introduced us to fermented food and to gut health, which is something we just weren't even thinking about before then.
Mendel, you mentioned 2006 as a sort of inception date, but if I think about life back in 2006, I mean, fermented foods were not on a mass radar whatsoever. And I think Noma in Copenhagen, who are sort of credited with,
We've got their
uh,
book in our factory.
I think they weren't even fermenting until I saw some different dates, but t some time between 2003 and 2008. So 2006 is definitely right at the beginning. So it's extraordinary that you'd even picked up on it.
Yeah, it was extremely niche at that point. I mean, to the point where it was a bit out there, like the average person, if they heard what I was doing, it was just very, um,
Fringe.
He was
yeah.
known as the family hippie. We all thought he was very weird when we were younger. He'd be walking
Yeah.
around with his raw salad bowls and weird eating carrots with the skin on, and we were like, "What are you doing? You enjoy that. We're just going to eat our kind of normal food. And it was only because I started to suffer with IBS that I then spoke to Mendel, started to understand why he was doing it, went to his nutritional therapist, and then started to change my diet through him. And then actually it was when we had two daughters, and when the first one turned two, we started to change our diet mainly because of her. She was she wasn't very sick, but she'd have temperatures of above 40 quite often, tonsillitis, she had a little bit of eczema. And when it's your child, you're like, oh no, what's going on? What's happening here? So then I think it was then that we really started looking at our diets. So we had changed our diet a little bit because I had IBS, so I had changed a few things. But it was really only when our daughter turned two that we were like, right, okay, we need to do something. And then I started speaking to Mendel, and he would give me advice. And then Adam had his own journey with ulcerative colitis. So then I think he went gluten-free. I think that was the first thing we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we went paleo. And then we've adapted it throughout the years. But it was Mendel that introduced us to fermented foods.
Mm. I mean, that's amazing. Mendel, it sounds like they have a lot to thank you for. When you started to introduce fermented foods, did you notice that that specifically made a difference?
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to remember because now it's so far back, and I think there were so many things that I was doing at the same time that it's hard sometimes to distinguish, but it was definitely, yeah, improving digestion, which is improving the gut. Um, yeah, I noticed massive changes during that period, but like I say, there was so much stuff I was doing. It would be hard to isolate one big thing.
I say the same thing. I did notice a difference from fermented foods and from probiotics that Mendel had recommended. We had changed other things as well, but I do credit the fermented food and the probiotics with helping to fix my issues for sure.
Mm.
It was definitely a big part of it, but I usually say it's not a magic bullet. You do need to be making other healthy changes at the same time.
When I was probably still at school, people would say, "Oh, if you eat a handful of blueberries every day, you'll be healthy." But now I kind of think we're just complicated machines, and there are many cogs in there, and diet is one of those cogs. But there are several other cogs, and the blueberries might be one part of one cog, but you've got to look at the whole system to really make it sing.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody's so different as well. So one thing works for someone and, doesn't work for someone else. So you need to be doing, I say, a bit of everything rather than just focusing just on one area.
Yeah. And are you all like that now? Do you all look beyond fermented food? I mean, clearly it sounds like your diets are pretty good right now, but does living well go beyond that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
Yeah, as I said, a little bit of everything, making sure we sleep well, keeping fit, drinking lots of water, drinking the right water. I think at one point, so me and Adam, when our daughter was little, we got a little bit obsessed when we started to become healthier. We got obsessed and we were looking at everything, and we went keto and we were 100% keto. So I was cooking everything. And this was in 2012. So you couldn't go to the shop and buy many things. So I was making everything at home. And then actually it just became too much that I was so stressed. I was in the house, I wasn't socializing because I was cooking all the time and we couldn't eat out. So it got to a point where we actually said, okay, we need to reassess because I'm going to die from being stressed rather than what I'm eating. So then we had to reevaluate, and our kids were getting older and they were going to parties and play dates. And you realize you need to find a balance. You can't be 100% strict on the food all the time, and you have to find a balance of lifestyle, wellness, sleeping well, exercising. So yeah, fermented foods is just a part of all of that.
How is it for the kids? Because they're traditionally difficult to get onto these kind of foods, right?
Yeah, so you have to start young. We had two. One of them was 2 years old when we started loving foods. So the older one, it's more difficult for her. So I sneak it into her salads. So the more mild tasting ones, like just plain sauerkraut, she knows it's there now, but at first I would sneak a little bit in. So where I can, I give her some, but she's trickier. Whereas our youngest grew up on it. Adam at the time was making kefir, a milk kefir at home. She loves kombucha a bit too much. I need to tell it. She tries to have it just before bedtime, and I'm like, there is caffeine in here. It's green tea, so we need we need to limit it. But she loves kimchi. She doesn't mind the
She eats it
spice.
from
She
the jar,
loves,
doesn't she?
yeah, she loves the kimchi more than the plain sauerkraut. And even more than the kiddie kraut, which is our newer product. But she's stuck on the kimchi. But yeah, I think you need to start them young, and you also need to be a bit more playful with it and let them get involved and understand what it is. But when she was little, she used to help me in the kitchen. So like when we set up Loving Foods, we were working from a garage outside of the house. So she was two, so she would come in and she would help me she'll help me label the kombucha and put them in boxes. So she was sort of involved in it. But yeah, giving them choices because we have many different flavors as well. So seeing what they prefer. But Mendel's got a little one as well, so he can tell you something about his journey with it.
Yeah, from a young age, he was eating, straight out the jar. And he's gone through phases. Like last night, incidentally, I gave him some cold kimchi, and he did pretty much eat all of it. Um, so I think, yeah, it's like Faye said, if they get the taste from a young age, it'll kind of stick with them. And even if they do go through phases of maybe having less or um, but I think for older children, it's probably something I guess similar to adults, um, where they've got to gain that taste and desire for it. But it really helps, you can tell, you know, from them eating that kind of food, it helps their health, their digestion, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is amazing. When three of you can talk like that and talk about the benefits of it, um, that's a very powerful message. And I don't know, there was an experiment, I think it's about 100 years ago, where Clara Davis got a whole bunch of young kids who had just finished weaning. So they weren't used to eating any foods out there. And she put in front of them every day, I think it's 40 different types of foods. And there were fresh fruit and veg and beef marrow and that kind of thing. And the kids weren't fed anything unless the kids indicated they wanted to eat something. And so these kids would go for breakfast, they might have liver and orange juice, or for dinner it was sort of banana and beef marrow or something. But they, the experiment claims, it went on for years, but the experiment claims that they were all perfectly healthy. One of them even had rickets and was going for the cod liver oil until a point when the rickets was cured, and then they didn't bother going for the cod liver oil anymore. And so the idea is that you will eat what your body needs. That was the idea of the experiment anyway.
You always say that, don't you, Faye?
Yeah, it's tricky though with kids because our youngest would go for the sugar a lot of the time. But then it's interesting because she's got a very sweet tooth and she will load up on sugar sometimes. And then actually she will be like, okay, I need some vegetables. And she will ask for something, or she'll go for the kimchi. But yeah, so it's interesting. So even someone who has a very sweet tooth and can have access to sugary foods, you see there is a limit. There's a point, and then they're like, no, okay, I don't need that anymore. Don't want it
Yeah. I
anymore.
mean, sugar to me is such a fascinating subject because many parts of the world drink a sugarcane juice and see it as a health drink. So, and I know until recently, Cuba's consumption of sugar was double the US, and yet they didn't have any of the diseases associated with sugar. So I feel like we're at the beginning of understanding sugar in itself. And
I think it's a balance. I think most people would probably be better off with no sugar in their diet, but I think the problem in the West is that everything is sugar. So it's just constant, it's non-stop, the cheapest, the easiest food is full of sugar, not to mention other additives, but it's just too easy and it's too all-consuming. I mean, even the things that people don't see as sugar, so the refined carbohydrates, the breads, the pastas, the biscuits, it's all turns to sugar in the body. So we are just constantly eating sugar. So I'm sure there are cultures where they have a traditional drink like you've mentioned that's got sugar in it, but they're probably not consuming sugar as the as the main component of everything else that they eat. So I think there's a little, well, yeah, we'd be better off without it, but I think there's a balance, and I think it's probably okay to have a little bit if you're moving around and you are not, if your diet doesn't consist entirely of refined carbohydrates and sugar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which makes me think about when I look at the ingredients that you use in Loving Foods, they all seem to be very pure. And I feel like it'd be quite easy to slip some things in there to make it taste better, maybe. But you don't seem to have done that. And so, have you got a set of values that you use when you're sourcing ingredients?
Yeah, I mean, I think a hot sauce is the best example of that. I love sauces. I grew up on everything had ketchup on it, so I'm used to sweet tasting sauces, and I try not to have them anymore, but I do love them. But our hot sauce, we could easily have put some thickeners in that to make it a little bit thicker. We could have put some sweeteners in it to make it, taste a little bit sweeter. I was going to say nicer. That's probably not the right word, but a little bit sweeter for the mass consumer. But we decided against it. The hot sauce is just the vegetables, the spices, some apple cider vinegar. I mean, we've always taken that approach, but then with the fermented veggies, there's not a lot you could add into it. I mean, you could use preservatives, I suppose, or flavor enhancers, but no, I mean, I think our ethos is exactly as you would make at home. So, you wouldn't be using artificial colors or flavorings or additives or thickeners. I mean, you might put sugar in something, but we try and make everything exactly as you do it at home, which is challenging as you start to scale up, but that's probably our main ethos.
For example, the kimchi, it's a lot of people question our kimchi and say, well, it's not traditional kimchi, although there's hundreds of recipes of kimchi, because we don't put rice flour, we don't put sugar, we don't put the fish sauce in. So it's just vegetables, salt, and seasoning, flavoring, spices. So yeah, we really try and stick to just clean ingredients, and we don't put anything else in, mainly because the whole reason behind it was to keep it as healthy as possible, because it's for health purposes rather than just reaching for a pickled food because it tastes nice or something to have with your food. The idea was that it needs to be for your health, because Mendel's a nutritional therapist, and he can talk more about it. But that's why we started the business. He was making fermented foods anyway, for himself, and they're all his recipes. And we wanted to keep it as clean as possible because it is for gut health.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. It's not that traditional Korean kimchi is an unhealthy food, but we wanted, none of the extras in it. So no sugar, like Faye said, no fish sauce, so that vegans could have it. There's a lot of people like us, when we started, we didn't want any refined sugar in our diet, so we didn't put that stuff in the kimchi. So yeah, that is another good example.
That is really interesting about the ingredients that you don't put in there, actually. I think um, it makes me think about organic ingredients and regeneratively farmed ingredients versus conventional. Do you have any perspective on that? I know you use a lot of organic ingredients, but is that really important?
Yeah. Um, I think, answering the question, it was like I wanted a product that I would eat myself. And the basis of, all my training and everything that I was working with clients with, I highly recommend organic food versus conventional, to minimize pesticides and herbicides and all the other stuff, genetically modified ingredients. So I do think that's a real key to not only health, but also gut health. There's a lot of research been shown of the damaging effects that some of these chemicals cause on the gut, particularly to the bacteria in the gut. So I think that was important for us, and the values were based on, like they said, and Adams mentioned, it was health based rather than we weren't just joining in on a new fad. Um, we wanted to provide people with a product that we wanted to be able to buy at that point. When we got into our journey, we it wasn't really available. Definitely not readily available. There was a couple companies emerging. So we just wanted to offer the best possible product, the healthiest product. So not cutting any corners, really going for the best ingredients. Um, and
Was
yeah, that's the foundation really.
was that how you saw getting started with Loving Foods, that it had obviously had a transformational effect on your own lives and you wanted to share this with other people? So it really came from an idea of a health food first.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You know, where it really hit with me is I went traveling to India. Spent 6 months in India, and when I came back, you know, food there is difficult, particularly when you're traveling, like getting quality food, and all the different bacteria and parasites and stuff that you tend to pick up there. I came back with a pretty messed up gut. And so straight away I knew, like, okay, I need to focus on my diet and gut. And I just started fermenting like everything I could. And I went a bit crazy. And it was from that place that the kind of idea for a business came about. Mostly through friends, I was sharing a lot of my ferments, with friends, and they were like saying, "Oh, you should sell this," at the farmers market and stuff like that. Initially, I passed it off, and then eventually I did try it out, and I realized like there was interest. So yeah, that was I was seeing the effects it was having on me, also the effects it was having on like Faye and Adam and other people, other friends that I was sharing things with, or other friends that were on a similar path. Um, and initially, I didn't intend to start a business. I was a nutritional therapist and I was working with clients, and that was my way of like sharing my knowledge and helping people to heal. Um, and then the business came about through that. So I guess that desire to help transferred into loving foods, wanting people, yeah, to be able to find a really good quality product that is going to help them rather than say, oh, this is really good for you, but actually we've cut a load of corners, we've pasteurized it, and it's actually probably not going to do that much for you. Um,
I mean, it would be much cheaper for us to use non-organic produce, for
mm,
example. It's hard to get hold of, it's hard to get a reliable year-round supply. It's really dependent on the weather. It's really challenging to use organic. It makes the product a little bit more expensive, although actually ours has become a lot more competitive over the years because we haven't put our prices up. But it would be easy, it would be cheaper, but we wouldn't want to eat it, and so we don't produce it. So using organic produce is one of our red lines where we would just not compromise on that.
It's also
Yeah,
not
good.
just organic though. We also, the way we package it as well, we've always put it in glass. Um, we could easily put it in plastic. It's so much cheaper and easier, but we don't. So I think everything from start to finish, we think about, yeah, we're very careful about what we package it in, what we use, right from start to end.
like Faye says, even in the fermentation, we use food grade stainless steel for all our fermentation vessels. A lot of people would just put it in plastic, but for me at the time, it was like that didn't feel right. Knowing it's quite an acidic product, and through the fermentation, the acidity builds, and plastics, I mean, now we know so much more. Back then, I just knew it wasn't a good idea, because plastics get broken down with acidity. But when you think about all the microplastic problems we have now, there's more research done. But yeah, we just wanted to know that we're taking every step we can to make sure it's the most healthy product.
I think that's something that people don't think about. We ourselves try and avoid plastic packaging where possible for health reasons, and I'm sure a lot more people are doing now because of the information that's out there. But I think particularly with fermented foods, I don't think a lot of people maybe appreciate it's an acidic product. It's what, below 4 pH, Mendel, most of our products.
Yeah,
So
it's usually about three when we're packaging.
so even though we'd avoid all foods in plastic if we can and where we can, in particular fermented foods, and that applies to the drinks and the veggies, they're quite acidic. It's part of the benefit that they provide, the health benefits that they provide, but they're quite acidic. So to be sitting there in plastic, whether it's during the fermentation or whether it's in the packaging when it's on the shelf, is just not something you really want. So again, it would be much easier for us, much cheaper for us to use plastic, but that's just a line we wouldn't cross along with organic.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I mean, those are all things that I approve of. So then, just where it sounds like you had product market fit before you'd even started this thing, which is, I think, the magic of any successful business. But were you, in the beginning, were you giving stuff to your friends or were you selling them? And did you go onto a stall at a farmer's market first? Was that the first selling point?
Yeah, for me, I started something on my own before we started loving foods. That was where kind of tested the market, I guess. It was very early on, and it was small scale, but it was where I saw that, you know what, there's a lot of people out there that want this kind of product and will buy it. Um, and so I'd done that for maybe 2 years, and then the three of us got together. So by that point, I already had like formulated some good recipes that I tried out and I knew they were successful, you know. Um, and so then it was, yeah, when we got together, we initially started at farmers markets on the weekend, and Adam um, designed the website and got our products listed on Amazon and stuff like that.
I remember when we put the website live, and we didn't do any search engine optimization or anything like that. We just created the website, put it live, and suddenly orders started coming in. It was like magic. Um,
Mm.
so we started as a direct to consumer business, and then we just didn't consider any other option because we only had a limited amount we could make because we were constrained by the size of the premises in the back garden. So we just sold straight to consumers because it was a better business model than retailers, higher margin, and the money comes in up front. But at the same time we were doing that, yeah, we started in the markets, didn't we, Faith? So we would go, well, it was you and Mendel, I suppose, more than me. We're going to local markets and telling people about it, but we had the website running at the same time. And then slowly we grew from there where we could talk to small retailers or cafes and then larger retailers, and then it kind of snowballed from there.
It was difficult at the markets because, think back to 2016 and Manchester, it wasn't London. And, we're at these markets sometimes speaking to people about kimchi and kombucha, and, it just went over their heads. It was like, wow, what are you talking about? And then they would taste it and, you get all kinds of responses. And yeah, it was a difficult period. We didn't do it for that long. But it was good. We were really there at the very beginning, it wasn't the big thing, that it even was in 2020, for instance, but definitely not today. So, we had to work hard trying to get people. But like as Adam said, because once he got the website live and Amazon stuff, we were able to reach people throughout the country, and then even in Europe, who were already aware they were searching for the product, and there wasn't that much at that time available.
I mean, that is amazing for so many reasons. I mean, first of all, orders coming into a website before you've SEO'd it or anything is incredible. But at the same time, it sounds like you had trouble explaining to people the benefits of this product when you were in person on a market stall. And my experience of speaking to founders is that it's usually the in person where they're able to make the sale and not on the website. So this is kind of reversing of that. But I was going to ask if you had trouble persuading people to try it in the beginning. What were those early times like on the market stall? Were you sampling like crazy and people just weren't taking it, or was there enough interest to keep you going back week after week.
I know the markets would often cost us more than often cost us more than we sold in jars of kimchi. So it was really just a bit of a exercise in trying to get the word out. But Faye, you probably remember back to that time because you did a lot of it.
Yeah, we did a lot of sampling and a lot of education. So people would come and they would try it or not try it, and we would talk about it. You'd find a few people would come and knew what it was. So we made some purchases, but I think back then we didn't do it for that long because, as Adam said, we didn't even cover our costs sometimes. And me and Mendel, during the winter, would be taking all these boxes to and from the car and not really selling very much. So we were very lucky that things kicked off quite quickly on the website, and then we just stopped doing the markets. But I think it's important to speak to people and to meet people that don't know what it is or don't know enough about it or that haven't tried it before. So they were quite good for that reason. But yeah, it was a long time ago. So, there were a lot of people that didn't know what it was. And then I think things got easier. I think it was during lockdown. Is that right, Adam? During lockdown, I think people heard a lot more about fermented foods. People were more conscious about looking after themselves and their health. And then I think from there, people started to understand it more and know more articles about it, people sharing more information online. So it definitely got easier around then.
Is it the same recipes that you do now that you had right at the beginning?
I think some of them are, aren't they, Mendel? And then
Yeah.
we've released some new ones over the years.
Yeah, we had the foundation. So like obviously the plain sauerkraut, the caraway, the regular kimchi and the turmeric kimchi. Those were the four like foundation products we had that are pretty much the same. We might have tweaked a few little things. But yeah, over time we added some extras, and also demand from customers. And that's something to say, also about the health aspects. We've had some really loyal customers that have been with us, from the beginning and buy direct from us and, will share their feedback and the effects it's having on them. We regularly get feedback like that. Oh, it's helped me with this, that, and the other. Um, and requests, so Adam was always getting requests. Oh, can we have a kimchi that doesn't have any spice in it? Can we have this? Can we have that? To the point that people think we can just tailor any kind of product for them. But at a certain point, when you get enough requests for a particular thing, we're like, okay, like let's give it a go, and so we did. And that's how a lot of the newer varieties have come about.
Yeah, I think we'd get a lot of people who were used to traditional kimchi and didn't necessarily understand why we were making what we call a more westernized version without any of the additives. So we developed a hot and smoky kimchi, which had the vegetables had a shape and texture, and the flavor was a little bit closer to a traditional Korean kimchi. And then we had a lot of people who were asking for a kimchi without any spices in, so we made a cool kimchi. We do sometimes get asked for products without any garlic or onion in, but like Mendel said, you can't tailor everything. So we're doing like 10 different types of veggies now. So we're probably close to the limit of what is feasible to produce in terms of 10 different flavors.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess we do have now without garlic and obviously the plain sauerkraut, but
Yeah,
now
we
we also
do. We
we
do,
have
yeah.
the kitty kraut
Yeah.
and the doggy kraut. Now, although they say the kitty kraut and doggy kraut, the anyone can actually eat them. It's just another recipe.
Yeah. I find it fascinating that you basically pretty much had the same recipes in the beginning as you do now. But it reminds me, I was talking to a guy who he was making matcha brownies and matcha cookies 5 years ago, and he said he couldn't give them away for free. And now they're his best sellers. But nothing's changed about the recipe at all. It's just
The market's changed.
exactly, it's that education piece. And I think that's really difficult for a lot of people who um, I don't know. I mean, clearly you didn't have a problem with it, which is amazing. I think there must have been something about probably maybe the timing, but probably your messaging and how you were talking to your audience that made them
I
understand
think
the
it
real
was
benefit.
timing, but also, most people probably don't know what a matcha brownie is, whereas although there's definitely been a period of rediscovery for fermented foods, this stuff is not new, right? Humans have been doing this for centuries. So
Mm.
sauerkraut, two ingredients, cabbage and salt, that's not changed for a long time. So, and there's some people who grew up, I know we get feedback from lots of people in the UK who say, oh, sauerkraut reminds them of what their mother or their grandma used to make when they were back in Poland or Germany. We get a lot of that. And they also say it's as good as what they had when they were young. So I think there's there's an element of the fact that we're rediscovering something that a lot of people are aware of. You know, people have know sauerkraut. Oh, it's that stuff you put on hot dogs, or it goes in a pastrami sandwich. And kimchi, maybe not so much in the West at least, but I think it's maybe more well known than something like a matcha brownie. So, but we were in at the right time, I think, where people were just ready to start to. There was this trend to start to look at more healthy eating and what you were eating and the rediscovery of fermented foods. So timing was definitely part of it. I think we started at a good time. Like Mendel said before, there were only two companies doing this when we started, and actually one of them stopped what they were doing actually the same month that we started. So there weren't many people doing it, but it did take off quite quickly after 2016 when we started.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you take a lot of care with sourcing your ingredients and also making it. Do you see a limit to how big or how much production you can make while keeping your values strong?
Mm. Yeah, there probably is a limit. Because every time you upscale, you face different challenges, and there will always be, I think even like for us sourcing the amount of cabbage that we need to every year, um, year on year, it always becomes a little extra challenging, and so like if we were to be this, you know, I don't know, massive company making hundreds and hundreds of tons a year, um, yeah, we might struggle to actually get the ingredients we need, the quality of the ingredients we need so readily available. Yeah, we
That's
won't.
definitely a factor. And we also still make, a lot of what we do is by hand, including the filling of the jars. So there's no particular hard limit on that. We could just hire more people, but we would need more space and more people. And it's a lot more work and a lot more stress. And Mendel said the ingredients would be a factor even more so as the climate's starting to change. So there doesn't necessarily need to be, but there may be a practical limit as to, for our own sanity, because we're not just a brand. We can't just call someone and ask them to send us in 5 more pallets. Everything we do, we have to do ourselves. So we've avoided selling to places like Tesco and Sainsbury's, where you'd be doing high volume and you'd be on the shelf where everyone would see you, but you wouldn't make a lot of money and you'd have a huge amount of stress. So I think there's probably a limit in that respect, but we wouldn't change the way we make it. So yeah, if we reach a natural limit, then we do, but we'll never become a mass producer in every supermarket. It's not what we're going for.
How do people who are supplying supermarkets do it then? Are they making things differently? Are they?
It's a good question. I was just looking into it this week with one of our competitors that is in all the supermarkets now. I think what has traditionally happened is that people who start with our kind of an ethos, so maybe they're using glass, they're not pasteurizing, maybe they're organic, but they're trying to do things traditionally. They get to a certain, and companies are still starting up in the kitchen because they're seeing a growing market for this. And I think what happens is they get to a certain size and they realize it's not easily scalable. I was going to say not scalable, but it is, because we've done it, but it's not easy. It's not easy to scale. And one of two things happens. They either stop or they look for a subcontractor. And that is usually in Europe, because Loving Foods are probably the biggest producer in England, if not the UK, of organic fermented foods. So there's not, and it's a uniquely challenging product. You've got to have the stuff sitting in tanks for at least 3.5 weeks. So if you're selling a lot of product, you need a lot of space. a lot of warehouse space just sitting there, not doing anything for 3.5 weeks. If you're making cakes or biscuits, you bring in the ingredients, you make the stuff, it's ready in a day or two, you can ship it out. But with fermented food, you've got stuff just sitting there for weeks. So there are not any companies in the UK really that can produce it at scale. So the companies will either tend to stop, or they'll subcontract out into Europe, into one of the big producers, which then means usually a compromise in quality, one way or the other. Maybe you're not doing organic anymore, maybe you've got to use plastic packaging, maybe you're fermenting much quicker, maybe the product has to change because it needs to be packed by a machine, so you end up with a bit more of a mushy product. So that seems to be the trend for companies. We had a decision to make a few years ago when we were started to see the growth, whether we continue to produce it ourselves or outsource it. And we decided to go all in on making it ourselves in the UK. And it's challenging. There's pros and cons. It's definitely challenging, but I think we made the right decision because we wouldn't have the same product if we had someone else making it for us.
Yeah. Is there any way of testing the amount of microbes in there, yours versus theirs, for instance? Do you know if that?
Yeah, you absolutely can. What we don't do, although we actually literally have just sent some samples off to someone that we're working with in the Netherlands who is going to do some DNA sequencing using a new technique. But DNA sequencing is really expensive. If you want to work out the specific species that are in your product, that's challenging. But if you want to just do total lactic, the main bacteria are lactobacillus species, so they're lactic acid bacteria. So whilst it's expensive to work out which specific species are in there, you can quite easily test for the quantity. And we regularly do, so we send our products out to make sure that they're safe. And they always come back with, amongst other things, a total count of the lactic acid bacteria. So you absolutely could take competitors' products off the shelf and run a test and see how much live bacteria there is in there. We haven't done it, but you could do it.
Yeah. Um, I find it really interesting that you've decided to hang on to the production yourself, because I've seen, I think I got a bit depressed when I realized how many food businesses start up with the end goal of just selling to a bigger company. And so they never want to make any profit, or profit isn't their goal. They're not bothered whether they make profit or not. And I found that a bit disconcerting, because I thought, surely you're doing this because you love it. But the impression I get is these people have got an idea for a business, and it could be food or it could be electronics. They don't seem to necessarily care about it. But you definitely seem to take it very seriously and definitely seem to care about it.
Yeah, I would say that's the approach we took. Look, we are a business. I'm probably the more business-minded and focused of the three of us, and I have to make a lot of business decisions, and I have to make sure that we are profitable and that every jar we sell, we make money on. But we do it because we are passionate about it and we love the product, and it wasn't just a company that we could build as fast as possible and sell. So we've avoided all the supermarkets. We're not particularly interested in scale or volume for volume's sake. We prefer to work with the small to medium-sized independent health food stores. And that works for us. Will we ever sell the business one day? I don't know. I wouldn't say never, but it's not why we started, and it's not why we do it.
Yeah.
We wanted a
Brilliant.
product that we could eat.
Yeah.
So we could constantly have a fridge full of fermented foods that we were happy eating. We wanted to help others get healthier. I think that was the main goal at the beginning. It's like, we're making it ourselves at home. We struggled to find that. There was a couple of companies at the time, but we struggled to find fermented foods that we enjoy ourselves.
I was going to say somebody has to make it, and all those other brands that are looking for somebody to make it for them, if nobody made it, there has to be a company out there who's actually doing the production.
And
Yeah.
we have started making for the people now, which is something that we were never able to do originally, but because of the scale that we have now, we're able to make for other people. But we're probably one of the only companies in the UK that can do that.
And you're international as well, which I find very impressive. How far back does that go, and how big is the international side of the business?
So we were doing that for a long time, for quite a while before Brexit, because pre-Brexit you could just stick products in a box and ship them to Sweden or Norway, we sent all over Europe. Italy, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, Latvia, Switzerland, Monaco, and you could just stick something in a box and get it to wherever in Europe at the same, as easy as just sending it down the road. So that stopped with Brexit, but even after, well, it took a while after Brexit, but we started with companies in Dubai. We've got a company in Belgium who we private label for. We've got a company in Hungary. We've now got a chain of shops in Portugal who are selling it, and it's still been very challenging for reasons I won't completely bore you with, about the challenges of importing and exporting and paperwork and VAT and customs, but suffice to say it's very, very complicated, and most small businesses can't do it, especially food businesses. Importing food is difficult. If it's chilled, it's even harder. If it's organic, it's even more difficult. So most small companies have stopped selling into Europe. We've actually just finished working on a system that will allow us to bring stuff back into the continent more easily. And we're going to start helping smaller companies ship their products along with ours together. But what it has meant for us is we can start to move into Europe again. So we have plans now to start selling all over Europe, Portugal, Spain particularly, and then the Nordic countries and Germany and Austria and Belgium. So it has not been easy, but we now sort of have a path to more widespread sales in Europe now.
Do you go through distributors, or do you have a sales team that are just working crazily to get those doors for you?
We don't have either. We do it ourselves, but no, we don't have a distributor. I think that's probably a way that a small company could do it if you had a distributor that was prepared to bring your products in and deal with the importing. But what we've found is that a lot of companies in Europe don't want to deal with the hassle post-Brexit of bringing products in from the UK, so they don't. So it's harder to find importers and distributors in Europe who are prepared to bring your products in, especially if you're not talking about lorry loads. If you're bringing a lorry full of product, it's more cost effective. But if you want to send a pallet or two, especially early on as you're trying to scale up, it's complex and expensive, and a lot of companies don't want to deal with it. So we're doing it ourselves.
And were you led by sales on the website? So you kind of got an idea of what markets were interested in different products?
I guess it would make business sense if I said yes to that, but it's been so long now since Brexit that if I tried to remember where we were, it was, do you know what? It was really evenly spread. We sent a lot to Sweden and Norway. I remember sending a lot to Germany and Poland, and a lot to Spain and Portugal. But I think Europe is such a big place, and there's such a big opportunity all over. I think we're just going to try and sell to as many countries as possible. And I think naturally we might start to see more interest in some places than others, and maybe then we'll focus there. But I can't say there's anywhere specifically that we're targeting based on our previous experience. I think there's growing interest, and we'll see as we go which countries have more of an interest.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
When you go into those countries, you must be going up against other ferment businesses as well. Like there must be competition in those markets as well, but somehow you're able to sell there. So there must be something special about your product, your brand that people prefer.
I think the market is less mature than the UK. And even in the UK, there are not a lot of companies that do what we do. There are some smaller startups, but if you're talking about the bigger companies, there are not many that tick all of the boxes that we tick. And the main ones being, is it organic? Is it packaged in glass? Is it properly fermented, for a full 3 to 4 weeks? And is it unpasteurized? So you'll get some brands that do one of that. You've got Biona, big brand, big name, sell tons of products, make a lot of sauerkraut and kimchi. Most people don't realize it's pasteurized. They're eating it for years, and then they'll suddenly realize that it's not supposed to be on a shelf, it's supposed to be in the fridge. And then they'll come to us and say, didn't realize Biona was pasteurized, I'm looking for something new. And then there's other companies that might be raw and unpasteurized, but they won't be organic. So there's not a lot of companies, even in the UK, that do what we do, and I think there are fewer in Europe. I don't know the market in all the countries across Europe inside and out, but talking about Portugal where we are, I can probably count on two fingers how many brands there are here, and I think one of them at least isn't organic. So there's not a lot of people who produce exactly like we do. So there's a lot of demand, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, um, it matters very much if a producer has actually taken care to think about all the things that you've just talked about there. So the organic, the glass, and that to me is worth a premium, definitely. And if I'm offered something in a supermarket that comes in plastic and that maybe it tastes good, but if there's something at a slight premium that's made in the way that you're making, that definitely appeals to me personally. Um, but when you look at your customers, are they health fanatics? Are they people who really care about their diet as much as you do, or are they people who just want a really great tasting product?
Faye, you got any insights on that?
Yes, I was just going to say, I think they mainly know about health and they're looking after their health because we are a premium product. So if they just wanted something that tasted nice and something to have in their fridge, or to say that they're eating sauerkraut and kimchi, you can go to the supermarket and buy it in plastic tubs or buy it and it's pasteurized. So I think for people to say, okay, I'm going to pay a premium for this product, they know that they are doing good for the health. They know why they're buying our product. But then we have friends that we give product to, and they don't generally look after their health as much as we do. And they try it and they're like, wow, this tastes amazing. It's so fresh. Um, they're great products. You can tell they're fresh, you can tell they're well made. So everybody does enjoy them. But I think most people that buy our product are health fanatics. That's what you want to call
Well,
them.
health focused, maybe not
Yeah,
fanatic.
yes.
They're
Yeah.
interested in healthy eating, whether they have been for years or they're just starting now, because we intersect a lot of trends. I think there's a trend to reduce plastic in generally, in the environment generally, never mind in food packaging, but there is in food particularly. Organic, I think, is a trend. There's vegan and vegetarianism because all of our products, apart from 3 of our drinks which have honey in, are all vegan and they're all suitable for vegetarians. There's a fermented food trend itself, and then there is a trend of eating more real food and less processed food, and we intersect all of those trends. So if you're interested in, or you're starting to hear about any of those things and you're wanting to lose weight, or you're pre-diabetic, which I heard that now 40% of people in the UK are pre-diabetic, most of them don't know about it, or you've got an autoimmune issue and you need to sort your gut health out, or you just don't want plastic in your food packaging. So whatever it is, there's usually some kind of health focus, but people are going out looking for better options and hopefully discovering us at the same time.
Yeah.
But there seem to be people of all ages, 18 to 80, male or female, but usually interested in health and diet.
Yeah, I mean, you could be just dealing with the early adopters now and just about to hit the
I mean,
max.
that's a crazy thought, because if you'd have asked me 3 years ago, I would have said we'd peaked, but it's maybe, I'm starting to think maybe it's not the case.
Well, there's Tim Spector's got some TV show in the UK at the moment, and he each week he highlights a couple who have a terrible diet. Their cupboard's just filled with ultra processed food, and then 6 weeks later he goes back and they're drinking kefir and kombucha. They've given up the wine, and they're like, "Oh, this sauerkraut's delicious." And I'm thinking, I mean, that just seems like a really extreme turnaround, but I guess it is possible that people really are waking up to the fact that the food they've had is ultra palatable, maybe not giving them the benefits that they could be getting from food. And when people really start to switch on to that, I can't see how it's not going to make a massive difference to sales of really good food.
Yeah, I think that's probably an understatement in terms of not getting the nutrition that we were expecting from food in the supermarket. But whenever there's a news article or a podcast or a show, and I know Tim Spector loves fermented food, about diet and healthy eating, fermented food will always get mentioned, and sauerkraut and kimchi will get mentioned. Sometimes kombucha, usually kefir. Kefir is a great product for gut health. So, and there's so many more of these programs and shows. There's so much more interest. News articles. I'm always getting sent news articles, and yeah, we'll always talk about fermented foods. So, yeah, I can only see more adoption as
Wh-
time goes by.
What's your view on supermarket food? Do you shop in, the national grocers yourself, or do you avoid them?
And we
Fair.
do, but I usually don't buy the processed foods. Although actually, as the kids have got older, it is tricky, and we've had to relax quite a bit with their diet. And I try my best uh, to avoid keeping certain things in the house, but especially with our youngest, it's very hard. She needs snacks for school, and they need to be a certain snack. So again, talking, finding this balance of making sure that I feed them well at home, and then they do have these processed snacks. Sometimes I try and make them, but I'm the only one that ends up eating them. So it's tough, but I try my best. And we always have a good, healthy dinner at home. I never
And
used to buy the processed snacks, but it's easier now than when they were little. When we first started getting healthy in 2012, it was really hard and I had to make everything at home. But it's so much easier. There are healthy snacks, there's keto snacks, there's paleo snacks. So we try our best. But in general, when I'm shopping, it will be from, did they say the outside aisles? So the fruit and the veg, the meat, the fish. And I try and avoid the rest in the middle.
yeah, we're not saints. It's do have to have somewhat of a balance. But when we're buying fruits and vegetables, we buy as much as we can, and we always buy organic. We try and limit it or eliminate gluten. Dairy is not really an issue because we don't have a lot of it, and just as little processed food as you can get away with. But we do live in the real world, and we do have to go out and socialize with people, and I think what we discovered from when we were very militant with it early on is you do have to have a little bit of a balance. And I think we've hopefully found that now.
Yeah, yeah. And where do you see, or where are you going to focus growth on next? Are you talking about new products or new channels or something else?
I think new products is difficult because we already make 22 products. We've got a finite amount of space, unless we expand again. So I think new products is tricky. So we've got three kombuchas. We make three Jun kombuchas, which is kombucha brewed with honey. We make an apple cider vinegar, a hot sauce, a range of fermented vegetable juices, the 10 vegetables. So it's a lot of products already. I think the growth is going to come from Europe. I think the growth is going to come naturally in the UK, a little bit, more wholesalers, more retailers. But if you think of the size of the UK, and then you think of some of the countries in Europe and how many people there are there, I think now that we've found a way to get the products over there more easily in a more cost-effective way, I see the growth coming from there. I certainly don't see it coming from a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's, which would be the easy option, But like I said, with my business hat on, it would be a lot of volume, probably with a little bit of margin, and just probably not worth the effort. And not for nothing, but the independent retailers we work with, they like to stock products that aren't available in the supermarkets, and they don't like it when the products that they've discovered and have been selling to their customers suddenly appear on the shelf in Tesco's. So I'm mindful of that as well, and I think we just prefer to support that sector. So I don't think you'll see us in Tesco's tomorrow, but you might start seeing us in more places on the continent.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I like that. I remember sitting in meetings with people like Tesco's with a whole bunch of other suppliers, and they would say things like, "If you don't comply with these new regulations that we've just put in within 6 months, we'll delist you." And then someone would put their hand up and go, "Yeah, but it's going to cost me 50 million pounds to comply," and they'd reply with, "That's not our problem."
Yeah.
So and that's before you even get into all the deals that you have to fund and
Well, that's exactly what I've heard about working with them. The listings fees, the storage fees, the marketing fees, they can delist you at the drop of a hat. And We
Yeah.
work to look. It would be great to be in front of more people, and I guess your Tesco's and your Sainsbury's give you that reach. Um, but it's so hard making our product to make it how we make it, um, and it's just not worth selling it for nothing to a Tesco's just to get the volume. So yeah, we
Yeah. Well, it makes a big difference to someone like me. So I definitely appreciate that you're doing this kind of thing. And I'm hoping that there's plenty of other people like me out there as well.
yeah, I hope so.
And then just think about the brand that you've created. So clearly you're about healthy eating, but would you say there are other values that the brand that is summarized in the brand?
I mean, we actually have it on the side of the jar, what we believe in. And one of the things is making real food, making food that we would, in the way that we would eat it. So if we wouldn't want to buy it or eat it for ourselves or family, we don't do it. That's why we don't use plastic, why we don't pasteurize. Not taking shortcuts with anything that we do. There are things we could do to make the process quicker and cheaper or easier to ship, and we don't do them either. So those are the kinds of that's the ethos of the business really, just to make healthy products that we would want to eat ourselves for us and our family. No shortcuts, no additives, no nasties. And I think that's what we stand for really as a business.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Did you have to sit down at some point and define that, or was that always there from day one and just felt very natural?
I think we did it from day one, didn't we, Faye? But we hadn't defined it at that point.
Yeah, we hadn't
You,
thought about it. We just did it because we wanted to make something that we were happy to eat, and they were our values. So it was only sort of later on we sat down and said, "Oh, okay, yeah, these are actually our values," but we stuck to it without realizing anyway.
yeah, we did it, but we weren't communicating it to customers. So it's
Mhm.
not until we did our rebranding. And do you remember how long ago that was, Mendel? Was it 5 years
Yeah, I
more?
think it was potentially 2018, maybe the end of 2018,
Oh,
beginning
right,
of
so not long.
2019.
So we
Or
we, we
maybe it was
designed.
19. No, maybe it was early 2019, in fact.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, but yeah,
So we did the branding ourselves initially, which was just designing labels, but we didn't have a coherent story or message. And we worked with a branding agency to redesign all the labels. But if anyone's ever done branding before, they'll know that the first thing you have to do is sit down and discuss and work out who you are as a business, what your values are. So we did that exercise. It didn't change our values, but it helped us elucidate them, if that's the right word, but certainly put them into words, put them into a brand. So they guided the design of the labels, for sure, but they also put what we were already doing into words, so we could try and communicate that to customers. I think that's the way I would put it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. It really helps focus everything and keeps the message clear and simple for everyone. Did you find once you'd done that, it made a difference to sales or how customers perceived you?
I think it did, and I don't know if it was just we were in a natural growth phase. I don't. We wouldn't be where we were now without the rebrand. I mean, I think sales did really increase, didn't they, post rebrand, Mendel?
yeah,
Apart from all the communication aspect and talking to customers about what our values are, I just think the labels look great. They're really eye-catching, they're really colourful, they look great on the shelf. So I think we started to go into some bigger retailers and wholesalers and distributors after we did that. And I just think it was much easier for the retailers and the wholesalers to choose to list us because the products look great. Now, would they have done it with our old branding? Maybe, but branding, the one aspect of business that I can't really get my head around is marketing, which is why Faye does it. So marketing and branding, I'm not very artistic, I'm not creative, so I can't get my head around it. But I do think that what we did with the labels had a big impact. We would have kept growing, but I think there's places that wouldn't necessarily have chosen to list us because the products look great once we've done that branding. I think it was a really
Yeah.
important exercise.
I think with the branding, it's obviously part of it is what the product looks like on shelf, but also it's about focusing your message and talking to your audience. So when you're going into a buyer, branding also helps with that conversation, and that isn't necessarily something you'd see anywhere, but it's just a conversation. And if a buyer understands what you're about really easily, then they're much more happy to take you on, and they can sell that story to their customers as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it must have worked. And more recently, one of the things that we focused on, you'll see on the front of all of our jars now, it's got a logo that we designed and says that it was made in the UK. Because we haven't really touched on it, but I think that's another trend that people are more and more interested in, is trying to buy local. So where we knew that a lot more companies were going to buy from abroad, we wanted to focus on the fact that we were producing locally. So every product has a little stamp on saying that it's made in the UK, and I actually think that helped as well. I do think that helped because I think people are more mindful. Yeah, I guess it's the environmental cost of having stuff shipped abroad, but also just wanting to support local businesses and local companies. But I think that's something that's really helped.
Yeah. Does that help abroad as well?
Well, that's a good question. We'll see. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
people who are abroad like to buy good UK products, but I think probably there will be some of the opposite effect. There are stores in Portugal, I know, for example, where the Portuguese like to buy Portuguese products. So having something made in the UK might be detrimental, but I also know there's a market of people who like to buy products from different places. So it might be a little bit of swings and roundabouts, and we'll see. But yeah, for better or worse, it's on all the products, so you can see where it's made.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much, all of you three. That is amazing to get some insight into loving foods. Before we go, I just got one last question for each of you. What is your favorite fermented food? And that can be something from Loving Foods range, or it could be outside. I'd love to know. Adam, do you want to kick it off?
Chocolate.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you said that.
I think most people don't realize how much of what they eat day to day is fermented. Bread, beer, wine, cheese, chocolate, yogurt. There's so much stuff that you don't realize. But I love our kombucha and I love our kimchi. But if I could only have one fermented product, it would probably be chocolate.
Brilliant. Yeah. Mendel.
It's a tricky one. It's really tricky, actually. I'm going to say kombucha. Mm.
Any
And
flavor in
probably
particular?
in particular, I'd say the Jun kombucha, the lemon and ginger.
I haven't tried it. Is it like a mead?
I guess you could say that. I mean, but it's not brewed to be alcoholic. But essentially it's kombucha, but it's a specific culture that has been bred over however long to eat honey, basically consume honey instead of sugar. And it does have a much more, you could say, delicate, more champagne-like taste. Yeah, I've just always preferred it. And that's why, I mean, when we introduced it, that was very niche because, I mean, still today, I don't know how many companies are doing it, but at the time, I think we were the only ones, commercially at least. And yeah, again, that's a foundation flavor that we had from the beginning, and it's just a real classic, goes well with a lot of different things. I think it was the first product that we got an award on.
Yeah.
And I remember we were at a trade show, um, and they had a panel, and I forget who it was, but somebody big. He really gave us some very good feedback on it.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to have to try and find some now.
Mm.
Faye, what's your favorite?
I do love chocolate. But at the moment, I would say the Cortido sauerkraut. I'm having that every day. I'm absolutely loving it.
Is that
Um,
a spicy one?
it is spicy. I wouldn't say overly spicy,
Yeah,
but we have oregano in it, so it's a little bit different, and it's very finely grated actually, so it's not chunky. So I
yeah.
just find it goes everything I eat. I put on the top of avocado and toast. I put it with cottage cheese, with dinner. I just seem to be loving it right now.
I mean, how weird are we getting? It's not going on. I was about to say ice cream. I don't know if you eat ice cream, but
No. Yes, we eat ice cream sometimes.
okay.
Um, no, no, we had a recipe made by a recipe developer who made a smoothie with sauerkraut juice, I think it was, but I actually haven't got around to making it. I was always curious to see how it would actually taste. But no, I tend to keep my sweet, sweet. I'll have the cortido with savory.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, all of you. I really appreciate this. And, you've been going for over 10 years now. That's right, I think, isn't it? And that in itself is impressive. But also, I love the fact that you've stuck with your values. Keep it going, please.
Thank you. Well, if everyone keeps
Thank
buying it, we'll
you.
keep making it. That's what I
Yeah.
always say. So yeah, thank you for having us. It's been fun.